At this point in the build, it's time to do the tool head. You're going to need all these 3D printed parts here, and there may be a few that I haven't found yet. These are all laid out in the manual. And you're also going to need box C. This is where pretty much all of the tool head parts are. So you'll need this bag of metal parts. You'll need the Goliath, and you'll eventually need the motor as well. And then there's also this thermistor. You're also going to need your M3 screw bag. There's several screws that we're going to need for this part of it. And go ahead and remove these from the cellophane. For this section, you're going to need this long skinny piece. Go ahead and flip it over, and you also need this printed part here. And make sure that you grab the M36 flatheads for this part. Based on the manual, it looks like they're supposed to be flatheads, not button heads. And that makes sense. All right, so I'll go ahead and grab one. And I recommend using a straight screwdriver for these. And these are just going to go on the top here. Make sure that you've got the side protruding on the other side. And these little things need to be pointing to the top with the printed part. Give them a good snug. And then flip it over. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to put this piece on with the M36s as well. I did notice there's more room in these screw holes, so you probably could use something longer, but we're going to go with what the manual says. Go ahead and take your screw. We'll just get it started here, okay? And then this goes in here on top. Let's go ahead and torque those down nice and tight. Make sure that it's nice and aligned too. Even though there's two screws there, it can still get out of alignment. Okay, that looks good. All right, now that we've got this piece connected, I'm going to go ahead and go off script a little bit from the manual. And instead of installing this immediately on the carriage, I'm going to build it out. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you have the 3 holes here on the left. So if you got it like this, it's wrong. You also want these recesses here. So the screws are going to sit in those pockets. So go ahead and take your M36s. You're going to need 4 of them for this step. And just fit them in there. I just find it a little easier to work with in this, kind of doing it like this. So go ahead and sink those in nice and flush. And I'll repeat for this one. And then the front spacers, these matter on orientation. So go ahead and make sure that the left side has the hole in the middle. And you're going to use the second hole here from the front. And I'll straighten those out here in a minute. Just going to get them connected. And then on this one, make sure the hole is at the bottom on the right hand side. And just go ahead and screw that in. I'm going to go ahead and straighten these out. They should be flush to the side, not the front. And we'll have a chance to adjust that once we get it set on. Now before we mount it to the carriage, I'm going to go ahead and install the end stop as well. This is your end stop mount. And you're just going to take some M36s. And you're going to be using these 2 holes closest to the screw. And this one will be open. So I've got my M36 here. And I'm going to try to aim for the hole. Okay, that's in pretty good. Now I'll repeat for the second one. And don't worry about that tightening down too much yet. Now we're going to have to go ahead and put in our limit switch for the X end stop. Okay, I went ahead and got my limit switch out. Ideally you want this wired, but I'm just going to do that later. So I'll show how it's mounted. You're just going to hold it under here and take your M28s and put them in through the switch this way. Okay, that's the orientation there. And we'll have to come back later and put the wires on here, but that's not a big deal. So at this point, you should have an assembly like this, and now we can go mount it onto the carriage. And this step is pretty easy. You're just going to take your assembly, and you're going to set it over, eye up the holes on the carriage. Take your M3x5s, and go ahead and sink them in. And if you want, feel free to put a little Loctite on there. It's not going to hurt. And don't put these in all the way. Leave them a little loose until we got all the screws in. Okay, that is now finished. Go ahead and just tighten these down real good. And I would recommend using a straight driver, not a ball end joint, because you can strip these pretty easily. Yeah, that's good. You can see we're hitting our end stop here. Okay, now before we're done, we need to get this bottom plate mounted. And that doesn't matter which way you go on this. Both sides are the same. Take it here in the back and align it like so. And you're going to go in through the bottom. So take your M36s, kind of get them ready, and then go ahead and line them up. And make sure you adjust these so they're flush with the sides, both top and bottom. And just repeat for all 4 screws. For this step, you're going to need this piece here. You're also going to need an M3/6 flathead. You're going to need a couple of those, as well as M3 nuts. There's a recess here, so you know which side to use. You're going to drop this in like this, and don't worry as much on the position right now. And then just repeat for the second hole. And go ahead and tighten it down. And there we go. That is now in, and we're good. Pretty much ready for the belts now. Okay, I've gone ahead and ran the belts, and as you can see, I've got them kind of locked in here with a piece of filament, which is what's recommended. I am probably going to just trim that off with some flush cutters. You don't really need that much, but I wanted to have a little more. But anyway, once you connect that, you're just going to run it along the belt path here. And it does get a little tricky. Let me show this one in a close-up. So hopefully you can see that. The belt comes from the front here, what I was showing a second ago, around this front idler. And then it routes through this corner joint in the front. So it routes through here, and there's a little bit of what I call a wraparound. And from this side, you can see that pulley that you wrap around here. So it'll hit the motor pulley, and then it'll wrap around this, and then it'll keep following. And then you'll connect it here to the other front corner, and then you'll come through, and then you'll come all the way back, And here we are, coming down from another angle for this belt path. It's going to wrap around that pulley, and then it's going to come up and hit this pulley here. And that's a toothless pulley, so it's just the back of the belt. And then you're going to come around, and then you're going to connect to this back here. So here's the tooth pulley I just showed from another angle. You're coming around, and now you're hitting this. So when you get around here, you're just going to wrap it through, and then the belt will be hanging on the inside, and then you're going to slide this belt clip over it. Now mine are fairly tight. That's just kind of how I'm used to doing it. So the lower belt is very similar. You're going to come around the front on this bottom pulley here. You're going to come all the way across, and then you're going to just go here. Let me show this from another angle. So on the lower belt, you can see it kind of wrapping around there, and it's got that little wraparound just like the high one did. And then it's going to continue all the way to this other front corner, and there's just one motor pulley that you're going to connect to on this one, and then it's just going to keep coming down. And now this is the back left, so you're gonna hit this back left motor pulley, and then come around that, and then come all the way back, and then you're gonna hit this toothless pulley on the back, and then connect here, and you're gonna route through, and then put your piece on, just like the other side. So that is pretty much how the belts are run. They're really not too difficult. You probably are gonna need to use a little driver like this to help kind of poke the belt through. That's helpful, but I didn't have much trouble with that. Where I did run into trouble, though, was getting everything kind of straightened out and de-racked. So I'm used to having a relatively good amount of tension so that everything moves and doesn't fall off the track. When I was trying to tighten the belts on the back, these pulleys right here on the joints, the belts kept falling off those. So I ended up tightening them fairly good, but then I noticed some racking. I was like, man, how do I get rid of that racking? You are technically supposed to do the tensioning with these back motors here. And I'm going to show how to do that here in a second. But you want to use these back motors to do the tensioning. Now what I found out is there's a knob. I didn't know about this knob because it wasn't in any of the manual, but it is listed on the GitHub. Now this knob doesn't really do much. Whoops. The knob has a set screw in it. It's an M430, and there's a hex nut, and then there's this piece. I'm really not sure, to be honest, how this knob's supposed to work. It's I think the back panel needs to be on for this to work effectively. But what I went ahead and did to derack my gantry, I loosened this bolt right here, and then I loosened just a quarter turn on these two screws, and then I just kind of took my hand, probably what the knob's supposed to do, I took my hand and I pulled it back until the racking was gone, and I tightened it down. And you can do the same thing over here. So I don't think it's necessarily right now to get rid of the racking, but I'm just used to doing that right after I install the belt. So I went ahead and did that. So hopefully that's helpful to you. You're also going to need to push these all the way over, and you're going to need to trim your belt. You don't want it coming out much past here. So I'll go ahead and do that before I get everything going. But if you don't trim that belt, it's going to clog up when it gets to here. So you definitely want to do that before you get going with your printer. Okay, moving along for the print head. I'm going to prepare the printed parts, and I'm going to need to put in some heat inserts. The kit does not include these heat inserts, but I have some left over from another printer build. And you can get these. These are from West 3D, so I'll leave the link in the description if you need to get some. And I've placed the heat insert here. I've got my soldering iron up to temperature. I usually do this around 330°C. I'm just going to insert it as straight as possible. And that looks pretty good. And I'll just repeat with the other side. And these do have a little lip on the end, and just make sure that side is going into the part. Let's keep it in place. Yeah, that looks pretty good. One tip on this part, if you're having problems where this piece isn't fitting super flush on here, make sure that these are recessed a little bit. Just push them in, make sure that they're not bulging out, because you want to make sure you have a good seal here. So I went ahead and I took my soldering iron and just pushed them in a tiny bit more, and then I took a hobby knife and I scraped off some of the plastic that got on here. So now I should have a much better seal. Okay, I've got the printer laying face down, and I'm going to take this part, and we're basically just going to connect it here. And you're going to need M310s to do that. Push this down a little. I'll go ahead and get that started here in this piece. Make sure you get the button heads too. I'm going to reach around. It's a little tricky at this angle. Let's get that in there. And then that's in, so I'm going to do the other one. Now we got that piece in. Next up, I've got these M330s and spacers, and there's two of each. And you're going to insert your M330 through this bottom hole. And you may have to adjust the height of the duct. I need to loosen this up a little bit so I can adjust it and push it up to the right height. Okay, that seems to be about right. Now I'm just going to tighten it from this side. Okay, I'm going ahead and tighten this up. And by the way, I did not have M330s in my kit, so hopefully you do, but if not, just use what you got. And then I'm going to repeat for the other side. Okay, I've got the other spacer and the screw in. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up. And I believe the reason why this is adjustable and the screws are unknown is because it probably depends on which hot end you're using. So I'm going to be using the Goliath, and if you had to loosen these guys up, go ahead and tighten them back down. I'll show another angle here. Okay, I've got this laying on its back, and I'm trying to put, so this is the front side, I'm trying to put this extruder on, and I've already got one screw in here. These are, the screws that you're going to use are M3 5 Ultra Flats. So you can see the screw in there now. I definitely recommend Loctite on these, because there's only two holding it, and you don't want this loose. All right, now I'm going to prepare this Goliath hot end with this adapter, and I've already got one screw in here. You're going to need these M2.5 by 6s, and it took me a little trial and error to find these. And I know hot ends for some reason like to use this size. I know the Fadis Dragon uses it, and there's probably a few others, but these are just the right length. And make sure You're aligned the same way as the picture in the manual, where these fins here, or these pieces here are coming out. You've got your wires coming out kind of on this right hand side. Before attaching the hot end, I need to go ahead and cut a 22mm PTFE, and I'm going to use this Capricorn tubing that I've got. The kit does not come with any, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is mark out 22mm, and then I'll show you the tool that I used to cut it with. So I've got it marked now, and this is just a DIY tool, but I like this tool because I can get it nice, really nice accurate cuts with it, and nice and flat too. I think I've got it just about where I want it. And now I'm just going to push down and cut. I'm going to double check that I've got 22mm. That's what the manual says I need. So I'm right there, exactly where I need to be. And I'll go ahead and insert it into the Goliath hot end, and then this should go right up into the extruder. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the Goliath like this, and I'm going to dry fit it, make sure that PTFE fits. And you want to mount it like that, and yep, looks good. Everything's flush. And now I'll go ahead and use M36s to secure this here. I'm going to put some Loctite on there too. All right, and I've already got one M36 in. I'm going to go ahead and do the other. I did put a little dab of Loctite on here, and I'm using a ball-end driver. Whoops. Okay, those are good, and they should be holding pretty good with that Loctite in there. Here's a close-up of what mine looks like at this point. I did end up later adjusting the wiring, the heater core wiring and the thermistor to come out more towards the front left. But you can really do it however you want, whatever works best for your build. And next up is the Y end stop. And this is going to be mounted under the extrusion in the upper left-hand corner of the frame, and the rail is going to hit this end stop, the rail carriage. So you need to mount this like this. So this orientation. So we're going to go ahead and use a couple of M2x8s to secure this in. Okay, that one's in, and we'll just repeat with the other one. And then once you've got that in, go ahead and take your, I'm going to try M4x8s. I think those are going to work. So these will be what mounts into the extrusion. And here's what it looks like mounted. I've got the two screws here. The M4x8s work fine. There's the end stop, and here I'm just going to check the movement and make sure everything is going in fine and hits. There you go. So that looks good. Here's a good picture of it mounted. You can kind of see where it's at. You want it all pretty much all the way up against that motor mount. Okay, it's time for the back panel. Got this flipped on its front, and now I'm pretty much just going to remove this film here. You can see the nice logo here on the plate. It looks pretty nice. There's a few tiny scratches. The back side's definitely got a bit more scratches on it. None of these are deep scratches, but they're just kind of rough. But, you know, it's the back of the printer, so it's not a huge deal. But I'd kind of like to see these buffed out a little bit maybe, or just not scratched as much. My kit included these Meanwhile power supplies. One of them's a 350/24, one's a 350/48. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you have the right voltage for your country. Oops. So I am in the US, so I want 115. If you're in Europe or somewhere else that uses 230, then you want 230. But by default, it looks like they come with 230. Okay, those are both set now. And we're going to be attaching these to the back panel before we put the back panel on the frame. Okay, I've got the back panel here. Make sure you're on the back and not the front. The back does not have the logo. So you're going to be using these two holes here to mount the power supply. They're on both sides. And I'm going to mount it so that this is on the bottom and then it's facing inward. And that, of course, will cover up the voltage, so that's why you want to make sure you check it. And then on the other side, it won't cover up the voltage, but it'll be mounted the same way. So that's roughly how you're going to have it mounted. All right, unfortunately, the holes in my sheet here were too small for M4 screws, and that's what you need to go on the side of the power supply. So I've gone ahead and taken a drill bit and just opened these up just a tiny bit. So hopefully your kit won't require this, but it's easy. All you need is a appropriately sized drill bit and just open that up just enough for the M4 to fit through. And that did the trick. I take my M4 and fit it right in. There we go. And if you do have to drill your panel, just get a piece of tape, painter's tape or masking tape, mark your holes with an X, and then put a little lube on the tip of your drill bit as well. And then just gently, patiently go through like this. I definitely recommend going through the top side, that way anything on the bottom won't be visible. So you're going to want your finished look on the top, so go through the top. And I'll just show how I do it. Make sure you're nice and centered. That's pretty much all there is to it. And just repeat for this one. And then after that, just remove your tape and you should have some pretty clean looking holes. They're more like ovals now, but that's okay because they're the right size ovals. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and mount the power supplies. So this is the back left, and I do want the 24 volt on this side. I did confirm the Discord, 24 volt on the left back, 48 on the right, because you're going to be closer to the 5160s with the 48 volt. So based on how you mount the Super 8 board. So we're going to go ahead and put some M4x8s in here. You could probably even go a little shorter if you wanted to, but I think that's the shortest they gave me. And that seems to fit just fine. And then I'll go ahead and mount the other one. Okay. And then we're just going to repeat for the 48 volt. And now I've got both those mounted, and those look pretty good. Here's a few quick shots of a close-up of the 24 volt here and the 48 volt here. And you can also see that I've got the DIN mounts I'm going to lay out, and that's how I decided to do them. And for the DIN rail mount, I wanted to go ahead and I had to drill a couple more holes to be able to mount that, so I've done that here. Hopefully you won't have to do that with your kit. I went ahead and drilled a few holes for these DIN mounts as well on the bottom left and right. And unfortunately those were not included, but it was easy enough to drill. These are printed TPU parts, and they're important to protect the wiring when you run it through. And at this point you're going to need to put your roll-in M4 T-nuts, and those are going to go in the middle here, and they're pretty much going to go around the entire back panel. So I'm going to just show you some of the different spots. You got these right here, going up here. Now the one in the bottom right is for the tension knob, so you won't put one there. I'm just going to slide the frame up a little bit and to the side, and I'm just going to line these up to where the holes are. To install these T-nuts, I just take my driver and I slide them into position, and then I just give it a good twist, and that's really all there is to it. Now I'll go ahead and use some M410s to secure the frame into those T-nuts we just put in. And it's a good idea to start in the middle of the panel like the manual suggests, and go ahead and put your M410 screw here and just drive it in. When you get to the pieces that go on the sides underneath the power supply as shown here, you're not going to use the bottom left screw hole, you're going to go the one above it. Same on the other side. So those are only going to go in this way. You can't use that bottom screw. And this shows it a little bit better for the right hand side. Hopefully you can see that, which screws to use. For the feet, I'll go ahead and show how to assemble those. So you're going to need your printed part, an M4 screw, and a nut, and a rubber foot. These are the ones I'm using, but there are different kinds. First step is going to be to insert your M4 screw into your foot, and then go ahead and insert that through the hole in the part where the recess is. And don't forget your spacer. You're going to need to go ahead and insert your M4 nut. So there you go, just press fit that in. And then take your screw, your foot, insert your spacer, and then just line it all up. And then go ahead and tighten. It should draw in there nice and easy. And you can see it's right flush with the screw. Now for this other, for the rest of the foot, you're going to need, I found that you need an M425, and unfortunately my kit did not include any, so luckily I had some laying around from another project. But these are going to go through here, You may have to clean them out, but go ahead and insert those in. And what you're going to do is insert these through the back panel and then put your M4 T-nut on it and then screw it in the extrusion. So that's how that works. But just go ahead and repeat this for all 4 feet. And I've got all 4 feet done. They're looking pretty good. So now let's go ahead and install those. Okay, I removed the backing from the panel and I picked what I would consider the nicer looking side to be the side that is inside that you see. And the actual bottom itself that you won't see is the other side. And it's honestly not too bad. Now what you're going to need to do is go ahead and put in some M4 8s. You're going to have T-nuts on the end of them. And you're only going to do it in this spot, this spot, this spot, and this spot. So basically the top, bottom, and sides. And then after that, we're also going to thread our feet in. And it's going to take a little bit of finagling here. So you want everything with T-nuts to be threaded in. And then we're going to try to insert everything all at once and then tighten it down. I've got everything pre-threaded. And I went ahead and just tightened this center one here. This is a little bit, there's definitely some fiddly work here because you got to get all these lined up just right to get them in the extrusions. So just go ahead and work at it and then tighten everything up, and then that's pretty much it for the bottom panel.